Hello, friends. I'm Kendall Richardson, script editor for Michael and Phillip, and I'm here today with Wayne Stellini, showrunner, writer, cat lover, and all-around good friend of mine to talk about his exciting upcoming dramedy web series.
Thanks, Kendall. Nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining me. I am so excited to get the inside scoop on all things Michael and Phillip ahead of its eponymous debut very soon. So exciting. Okay, so I think I'll start by saying that Michael and Phillip, this web series, is actually based on the 2017 Fringe Festival play titled Michael and Phillip Are Getting Married in the Morning, which you also wrote.
Yes.
Yes, in this play, the events transpire over a period of just 48 hours. And so the plan for Michael and Phillip, I believe, is to be a long-form series. How do you think that will work adapting it by stretching out the time?
I think that the characters of Michael and Phillip and the world they inhabit is so interesting. It's relatable, but we play with expectations as well. And I think that these characters are just larger than life, that I wouldn't want to just contain them to the play that they originated in.
Yes, which is why I suppose they're getting a series, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you write the play and you're content, you put it out there in the world, you've got audience who responds really well to it, and you think, okay, well, that's it. But these characters just couldn't leave me after the play had finished its 2-season run. And I was like, okay, I want to explore Michael and Phillip, their family, their friends, the world they live in. I want to explore all of that a bit further. What do I know about these characters? What do I want to know more about them? What sort of clues are already in the play? So, for example, we get a bit of insight into Michael's background, that he does have a turbulent relationship with some of his family members. We get even less information about Phillip, because Phillip, bless him, is just too pure for this world.
Yes.
And, gets by. I don't know how he survived into adulthood, but he does. And that, once you start, thinking about that opens the can of worms. It begins this creative momentum of like, okay, well, what was their life like before they met one another? What was it like before the events of the play where they do get married? What could it possibly be like afterwards? And you factor in all the people in their lives, especially Michael's best friend and Philip's nemesis, Tally, into the mix. There's a lot of potentially interesting, sweet and hilarious scenarios that could play out. And I think once you start exploring that, you realize that for Michael and Phillip, for their relationship, for their trajectory as individuals as well as a couple, the potential is limitless. So I think transferring and translating a play set over 48 hours into a longer narrative for the screen, I think it's a challenge, but I think it's an exciting one, and it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for the boys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a feeling that maybe the fact that two very, very talented actors are actually returning to reprise their roles might have something to do with the fact that Michael and Phillip is being developed into a series. Was that part of the choice for getting Bane and Ryan to return to the roles of Michael and Phillip?
I think when you're lucky enough to work with talented actors like Bane Bradshaw and Ryan Stewart, all you want to do is work with them even more. And I've been fortunate enough to direct them in 2 different plays. But having the desire to expand the Michael and Phillip story, and always wanting to work with really talented people, especially people who understand these characters, the two really go hand in hand. It's difficult to imagine having this journey, this transition from stage to screen, with anyone but Bane and Ryan as Michael and Phillip. Really, Bane approached me about adapting Michael and Phillip Are Getting Married in the Morning to the screen, and I said to him, well, it's funny you say that, because I have always had plans of telling their story in the form of a series and exploring it further. And I pitched that to him, and he was like, I absolutely love this idea. We're going to run with this. And the momentum just sort of built from there. And Bain, who is one of the producers on the show, was like, I still want to play Michael. I was like, well, yeah, of course. You are Michael. And I said, but we have to have Ryan back as Philip. It is incredibly difficult to imagine anyone else playing Philip than Ryan Stewart. He just embodies all of Philip's most gorgeous and lovable qualities. It's really quite rewarding to see Ryan step back into the role of Philip. It's a role he's played for 3 years, essentially. He's been the custodian of the role for 3 years. Bain himself is the second actor to play Michael, and he stepped up to take on the role, and they were huge shoes to fill. David McNamara, who originated the role of Michael, is such a phenomenal actor. He became unavailable to play Michael in the second stage season, and again, Bain stepped up to the plate and was wonderful and just fell in love with the character and the story overall, that I couldn't say no when he approached me saying, I want to develop this for the screen, and I couldn't help but tell him, well, now that you say that, it was something that I'd actually wanted to do. So I think, the stars aligned for Bain to get on board again, as with Ryan. And both of the guys are just incredibly enthusiastic about the new challenges that their characters will face. And I think also the challenge of telling this story on screen. It's a different medium. We don't have the benefit of a live audience to bounce energy off. But look, if anyone can do it, it's these guys, because they definitely know these characters really well.
Yes, I can definitely attest to the magic that Bain and Ryan both bring, and I'm very, very excited to see what they do with this kind of expanded journey with Michael and Phillip during the course of this series. But speaking of changing mediums, I mean, this is your first time not only show running for television, but writing for television.
Yes, very exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Did you ever think TV writing was something you would do? I mean, you've been writing plays for a long time and just writing in general. Was this something was sort of like an end goal for you, or maybe something you'd want to try?
Well, it's interesting because when I first got serious about writing, it was in high school. And that's when I discovered how much I really loved telling stories, and would find that my classmates who I would show short stories to, that they responded quite well to most of the stories that I had written. I loved writing. My English teachers liked some of the work I wrote. and my fellow students who I trusted to read the story that I would write seemed to respond really well. Some would love, some would hate, but I found that I loved the polarizing opinions on my work because it generated conversation. And when I then was taken to the next step, I decided that I actually wanted to write for TV, and I found myself playing with ideas for TV shows and so forth, even in high school. That went absolutely nowhere after high school because my life took a different route. And I'd been thinking about writing novels. I thought, well, no, that's kind of a bit more meatier, if that makes sense. You could get into the characters' heads and so forth. So I'd been dabbling in a lot of different mediums. Yep. Ultimately, though, I did find playwriting simply by accident, I suppose, because it was how I fell into Michael and Phillip. So when I came up with the idea of Michael and Phillip, I thought, well, this would make a great play. It would make such a great concept for a fun play. And the only reason why my head was in that mindset was because I had worked on 2 plays previously, one as an assistant director and another one as a producer. And I thought, well, no, I've actually got this idea for a play, and once I developed that, turning notes into a full-fledged script and really wanting to then direct it, the momentum then started to build. So to really address your question, Kendall, now working on a TV show almost means that I've come full circle, because whilst I still write plays, I still write short stories and poetry and whatever the story I want to tell, I think there's always a medium for it. Every story needs its own medium. What works as a play might work better as a poem. What works as a poem won't work as a short story. And this idea about expanding Michael and Phillip into a series was natural. So I felt like that it wasn't so much of a new direction for me, but it was finding the right medium for the story that I wanted to tell. It's a different beast. Don't get me wrong. It's incredibly exciting, and it has its own challenges. It does also mean that your imagination can go bigger as well, because there's some things that you just can't do on stage that you can do with multiple camera angles and different sets and set pieces and a cast of thousands. Because you're not thinking about budget when you're writing, that comes later.
No. Yes.
So for me, stepping into television writing, I didn't think I would be doing it, to be perfectly honest, in this stage of my life, but I'm really excited that my own creative trajectory has brought me back here.
Yeah, that's really nice. I really like that. That's really, really cool. And focusing on the writing itself for a second, one thing a lot of writers tend to do is kind of insert themselves into their work, whether that's subconsciously or consciously. Do you think that there are any characters that are maybe based upon you or certain aspects of you that have magically appeared and that we'll see in the series coming up? Can you talk us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. Whether it's consciously or subconsciously, a writer will always appear in their work. It might start as a simple seed, and what blossoms is something totally different. But you know what? The seed is still there. There are some elements of characters in the show that are absolutely me. So the fact that that Michael can be a bit uptight, likes things a bit structured, and perhaps takes himself too seriously sometimes, and loves expressing himself creatively, is absolutely me. The fact that Philip is quite trusting, that he loves pop culture, that he's a bit of a nerd, and I feel like maybe doesn't realize how much of a dag he is sometimes. That is also very much me. So the boys have qualities in me. I'd like to think that Tally is the woman I wish I could be. If I were a woman, I think that's exactly how I would like to be. And I think that is an absolutely scary notion, because I don't necessarily think that Tally is anyone who you should aspire to be like, because
maybe not.
She's quite monstrous, and maybe I just have too much fun writing Tally that I'm confusing creativity to desires and wishful thinking. Yeah, I wish I was as open and as free and as comfortable with my own body and identity as Tally is. Yeah. So, I think maybe there are elements of wish fulfillment in my characters as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think if you look closely enough, you'll probably find me in every character in some way. But with Michael and Phillip themselves, those characteristics are the most prevalent, I feel.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Well, speaking of Tally, there are many, not just herself, but there are many characters one might consider to be eclectic in this ensemble. That's one word you could definitely use. Although there are many to describe Tally.
Yes, there are.
Yes. With all of these wonderful characters, do you think there are any other of these that are like maybe based upon people that you've met? Like, there are parts of Tally you can't make up. Like that's just... Where are there any kind of real life inspirations for some of your characters?
Well, this is the scary thing, I think, Kendall, especially because you and I are friends. We've known each other for quite a few years now, is that writers will take from everything and everyone around us. So we are absolute sponges. So as much as, I say that there are elements of me in all of the characters on a subconscious level, there are elements of everyone in my life, I am sure. To give you an idea, Blaine has a running gag that is always asking for money. And that's taken straight from my sister.
Oh, Lordy.
Who, is always looking for a few bucks from our dad. And to be perfectly honest, she's doing fine. She's doing well. And she does not need these extra bucks. But as an ongoing joke with our father, she will always ask for money. Who's going to say no to $5 floating your way, I suppose? Hey, it all adds up.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so I think, she's not as explicit as Blaine is, who will always be, can you lend me a few bucks? And sometimes he will give a dollar amount. And usually it's, I owe a mate. And and we never know really where this money is going when it comes to Blaine. We get a hint of where it should be going in our series. But Blaine is very charming and charismatic, and I feel like he can talk his way out of anything. And again, that's even a characteristic that I have in people I've worked with before, family members and friends, where you just cannot get mad at them. All they have to do is flash a smile or just give you a cute wink, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're forgiven, go away. But I guess really the question will be, can you and can anyone watching see themselves in these characters? And I don't know, it's interesting when people who are in my circle of family and friends, they'll see characters say and do things, and will look at me and will be like, oh, did you get that from so-and-so? Oh, is that a reference to this, that, or the other? And I will never confirm or deny.
Nice. Yeah, so this definitely sounds like it's shaping up to be a more of an ensemble kind of show, which is interesting considering, the name of the show is just Michael and Phillip. Was there a decision involved with kind of expanding it from just these two central characters into this big group of colourful people and personalities?
I think just like the source material, Michael and Phillip are getting married in the morning. From that title, you think, okay, cool. It's about Michael and Phillip who are going to get married in the morning. That's what the show promises. Yes. And really, it's what the show delivers.
Yes.
However, when discussing the play, I would generally say it's really more about the people in Michael and Phillip's lives who are interfering with the wedding. And so to take the template from the play and moving that onto the show is actually quite similar in that regards. Michael and Phillip are the heart, soul, and center of our story. They're our couple. They're the ones we want to succeed. However, there's a lot of objections. There's a lot of obstacles in the way of them living happily ever after. After all, the course of true love never did run smooth. So I feel like it has to be an ensemble because that's also quite real and believable. Because even as a loving couple, Michael and Phillip just don't exist for one another. They've got family, they've got friends, they've got work colleagues, they've got rivals, they've got just complete strangers that they might bump into. And I think when you accept that Michael and Phillip live in Melbourne, in the beautiful, diverse and eclectic city that it is, you can't limit yourself. I don't think.
Yeah. No. You'd be doing an injustice to the material and to your audience, I think, if you limited yourself.
Yeah, I think so. And I think once you open up the possibility of bringing other characters into the fold, the material becomes that much richer. Because I think also not everyone watching might be able to directly relate to Michael and Phillip. We might, we want them to get and fall in love and to succeed in their objectives, but we might relate more to Tally.
Yeah.
We might relate more to Blaine because, well, we're like them and we know a Michael and Phillip. And I feel like that way the narrative is just that much more involving. So, yeah. So definitely, yes, it is called Michael and Phillip. The show is about Michael and Phillip, but that does not take away from the importance of the people in Michael and Phillip's lives. And when you start giving them some love and attention, you then also open the door for other people in their lives. And we see this in the show as well. We see someone who is hunting Blaine down because, hey, Blaine is always in trouble. We see some of Tally's flings and how they get put into the fold. We see other friends that these boys have as well. And we see that this is a community. This is a family of choice. And that's really at the heart of Michael and Phillip.
Nice little summary. And speaking of summaries, I'm going to now ask you 2 questions relating to our 2 leads, Michael and Phillip, the characters themselves. Can you, if you would like to be so bold, could you describe both Michael and Phillip separately in just 3 words?
Ooh.
And then whether or not you agree with how, like, if that is how that character perceives themselves to the world. And what do you think about that?
Wow, what a great question. Okay.
I know.
I think Michael is a survivor. He does have a low self-esteem.
Yep.
And he's creative.
Yeah.
And I think that Michael would not give himself enough credit to call himself a survivor, because I think that takes on a lot of positive attributes and synonyms as well. You know, if you're a survivor, you're a fighter, you're strong, you're tough. I don't necessarily think he would even acknowledge his own low self-esteem. I don't think he realizes that he can be his own worst enemy sometimes. And he is creative. I think that is the one thing he will acknowledge. I don't think he gives himself enough credit of how creative and how artistic he is. But his creativity and the creative community is really important to him. And I think he does acknowledge that. With Phillip. Phillip is lovable. He is pure. And he is naive.
Yes, I could agree with that as well.
And I don't think Phillip would acknowledge his own naivety, because whenever he might mispronounce something or be led down the wrong path, he'll go one or two ways. He'll just flat out refuse to acknowledge it. You know, he'll always be like, oh, I knew that. Oh, no, that's what I said. He'll try to cover that up. Or he will come to the realization himself and not let anyone else sort of run with it. He'll be like, okay, no, I've realized this. We now need to move on. I don't think Phillip will ever realize how lovable he is, to be perfectly honest. I think when you are that sweet and that just good-natured, I don't think you realize how important that is to people. And pure at heart. Again, I don't think Phillip would ever acknowledge that. I think he's just being himself, to be perfectly honest. You know, if Michael needs a bit of a push to be his true self always, without fearing what other people think, Phillip does that without any thought or any consideration of consequence or ramifications. He never changes, and he's usually given a lot of flack by Tally, and sometimes by his own friends as well, for being the way he is, but he never changes. For somebody who is so pure at heart, there are certain things he won't take to heart. It just rolls off his back. And I think that that's absolutely lovely. I would like to think that Michael and Phillip see themselves as 2 good humans who are just trying to be the best people they can be.
That is very sweet. So, Wayne, you're going to be directing as well as all of your writing and show running duties. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So, in terms of directing, do you think that there are going to be any influences on Michael and Phillip and your choices in terms of style and tone for the show? Like any like other TV shows or any other films that you've admired or been inspired by over the years? Do you think any kind of those may creep in terms of influence on how you want to direct the series?
Well, I think the series in itself, when writing it, is heavily influenced by popular culture as well as the world around me. And I think if you're paying attention to what other people are doing that you're drawn to, you can't help but be influenced by that, whether it's on a conscious or subconscious level. For example, a show that I really love is Please Like Me, created and starring Josh Thomas.
Great.
I love the way that just depicts Melbourne. I love the way that it depicts its characters, because its characters aren't always the most likable or lovable. Like Josh himself in the show is not a likable character at all, but yet we're still connected to him. And that's really clever writing to be able to achieve that. The aesthetic is very contemporary and gorgeous. I think the aesthetic itself is a lot of character, and I'd love to have that in Michael and Phillip as well, where the aesthetic is just as important as the words in telling this story. As a director, I'm really collaborative. So even working with my director of photography, Dylan Pierce, he's giving me ideas. He's giving suggestions about how things could potentially be framed or shot, and the color palettes and the tones. And I'm really enjoying that, because it's opening my own mind and my own ways of thinking about how to tell this story on screen in a different manner, but one that serves the story. I mean, you don't want to get too distracted by bright, shiny things and and make it a bit of a clustered mess of ideas. It still needs to be clean and cohesive, but it needs to be true to the story of Michael and Phillip. So every show has, I suppose, its own handwriting, its own look, and its own style. And while this will be influenced unavoidably by the world around us and by other media, it's still going to have our own stamp on it. Being a collaborative director, not only will the crew play an important part, but also the actors as well. Because I think the way that an actor really brings to life their character informs the way that you should be directing them, and will inform the way they're lit and they're framed, and all of these different elements. So I'm excited to the continued journey of developing that style and that look. But really, I would love our audience to feel like they're in the room with these characters. It's that level of intimacy to be like, yep, I'm with them. So whether you're watching in Melbourne and you know the type of architecture we have, the type of housing we have, establishing shots of locations, or whether you're from the other side of the world and have never seen an image of Melbourne before, if you're in the room with these characters, you're connecting with them. And so I think that's what I would like to see happen, and I would like that style to be evocative of that as well.
Yeah, awesome. You kind of touched upon the collaborative process between the director and the actor whilst filming. Do you have, for yourself as a director, do you have like a certain technique that you use when approaching working with actors, or does it depend on the individual performer themselves and you have to be malleable in terms of working together to achieve the end goal you both desire?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think every actor will approach their role and their work differently, and that's perfectly fine. And I think you have to adapt, because at the end of the day, you're both there to serve the story.
So I have to say, for my money, one of the things that excites me the most about getting to see the story of Michael and Phillip brought to life as this series is the fact that it's a brand new LGBTQIA plus series for the masses to consume, because there are definitely not enough of those. We need more. So in terms of that and the importance of inclusion and community, for setting messages of like examples of what you want to portray and put out into the world through this series, and that you're hoping to convey through the show, what do you think your main takeaways might be from your consumers, from your audience? What do you think people might take away from Michael and Phillip?
That's a really good question, and it's almost difficult to answer without it being out there in the world and getting feedback. But I suppose I would love people to fall in love with Michael and Phillip, the characters. And I would love for an audience to be entertained, to be invested, and just feel good about the state of the world. And that might sound a bit strange at the moment to say that, but I think that when you tell a story where the core message really is about love in different forms and different shapes, that can only be a positive thing, I think. We've got the love that Michael and Phillip have for one another, the love that they have for their family, for their friends, the love that they have for their I think even when some of our characters might act in an unpleasant way, it's not for selfish reasons. 9 out of 10 times. It's driven by wanting to preserve something good. And I don't know, I'd love my audience to walk away from the show just feeling happy and feeling that they've engaged in a story that's about love.
Yes, that's definitely the message I feel that is at the heart of Michael and Phillip when it comes down to it. Do you think there was maybe something in your past or growing up that you've watched or read that made you kind of feel the same way as you want your audience to feel?
I know when I first started engaging in queer narratives, I felt a sense of community. Even though these weren't people I could physically touch or speak to or interact with, the stories that I would see unfold on screen and in books felt real to me because I could relate to them in some element and relate to them in a way that I could not with heteronormative narratives. And so I think for me, that's one of the driving forces behind Michael and Phillip is to give almost like an old-fashioned story for an audience who's never really had an old-fashioned story because they've always been so heteronormative. Yeah, and I think just engaging in stories myself when I was younger with people who started to look like me and be interested in the things that I was interested in, having that type of representation alone mattered to me. And I think I just wanted to advance that here as well.
So before we conclude this wonderful interview, anyone listening who has frequented your social media would have seen your gorgeous cat, Gypsy. Will she be making a cameo in the show, or is she just relegated to the role of your adorable writing partner?
Look, unfortunately for Gypsy, we have a no divas policy on set, so I don't think she'll be able to be making a cameo. She is by my side, and her main job is to kick me off my laptop when I have been on it for too long, and she forces me to snuggle and to take a rest from writing. So as my boss and supervisor, I think that is the role that she is quite content with. In saying that, you never know. Never say never.
Never say never. Awesome. So Michael and Phillip sounds like such a refreshing and welcome new series to the television scene. I cannot wait to see it. Do you think it's safe to say that the rest of Australia will be tuning in and soon falling in love with Michael and Phillip?
I would absolutely hope so. I think if their previous incarnation on the stage was anything to go by, I would love to see Australia and as much of the world as possible fall in love with Michael and Phillip. They've got some fans and supporters who are absolutely in love with them and their story, and I'd love nothing more for more people to engage with it as well.
Awesome. Couldn't agree more. In the words of Molly Meldrum, do yourself a favour and check out Michael and Phillip when it hits screens sometime in the near future. Wayne Stellini, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. This has been a wonderful pleasure.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me, Kendall. It's been a joy. Thank you.
Very welcome.